Let's go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. So we're very excited about the webinar that's going to take place today. And we will, it is now 2:01. So we'll wait till about 2:03 and we'll officially go ahead and get started. And we're so happy that we get to have our guest speaker today, Dr. Lauren Brace. I can't wait to introduce her. And like I am just really excited about the webinar today. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So we are so excited about today's webinar. And before we get started, I'll go ahead and just give a brief introduction about the Center for Energy Education. So the Center for Energy Education, we are a nonprofit organization, and we are a place for learning and training for the community. Furthermore, our mission is to be a cutting edge space where education, research, and industry leading professionals work and learn side by side. We are a space where the local community finds the inspiration and opportunities to become the energy professionals and advocates of sustainability of tomorrow. So we do have several partners, within the community, and we're so proud of that. And in terms of our work, we build leadership capacity, provide clean energy workforce opportunities. We offer community engagement activities and K through 12 educational programming. And we also offer webinars. So I actually want to go ahead and jump into our introduction today for our guest speaker. We're so excited. We had the pleasure of meeting her at a conference last year. My colleague Reginald Bynum and I, and so. This is Dr. Lauren Brace. She is currently Goodyear's Product Sustainability and Stewardship Senior Program Manager, where she leads the development and integration of product sustainability and stewardship programs into Goodyear's business model, including design for sustainability strategies. And the title of today's webinar is Soybean Oil as a Replacement for Petroleum-Based Oils and Tire Applications. And at this time, I'm going to turn the webinar over to our wonderful guest speaker who we're so excited about, Dr. Lauren Brace.
Thank you very much, Whitney. My screen queued up here. I'm not going to be able to see you guys anymore, so somebody speak up if there's any issue, but we should hopefully be good. So as Whitney mentioned, my name is Lauren Brace. I am the Senior Program Manager for Product Sustainability and Stewardship at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. I've been with Goodyear for about 14 years. I started actually as a material scientist. That's my background. I did a lot of materials and product development for several years. I also spent several years working in our North America consumer tire business, and then moved back to the R&D side, managing some of our material testing labs, and then eventually moved into this role. So this topic is actually pretty near and dear to my heart because I've worked on it a lot over the years. For many different reasons and in kind of all of my roles that I've worked in at Goodyear. And so this whole thing really brings it together. And like Whitney said, we actually met at a conference last August, and she asked me to come in and give this talk to this group as well. So when you think about tires, you're like, okay, they're round, they're black, they go on my car. How complicated can they really be? The answer is they're actually quite complicated if you don't know much about tires. And so there's a lot of different performance attributes if you think about it. And when you're driving around, North Carolina, you probably get a lot of rain. Now you guys get some ice storms in the winter here and there. But what are the tires really doing for you? They're the only four connection points that are connecting your car to the road. So they actually serve a very, very important job and taken quite for granted by most people because they're just kind of there. But if you haven't paid much attention to tires, and if you don't know this, if you are, a vehicle enthusiast, then you probably do know this, but there's not all tires are created equal, right? You can buy different tires for whatever you want the performance to be. Maybe performance in the rain is really important to you. Maybe fuel economy, because tires have an impact on the fuel economy of your car. Maybe that's really important to you. Maybe if you live in Ohio like me, snow performance is very important to you, right? And so on and so forth. And so historically, we'll call it more than 10 years ago, the performance attributes were really just that, performance attributes. And then sustainability really started to pick up again about 10 or so years ago, but it was increasing before that. But that's when it really started to accelerate. And that really became kind of an attribute of its own, but it's tied to some of the other ones. Now, you always want the best performances across the board that you can get. Whitney, I see your hand raised. What's up?
Yes, there's some issues with the sound, Lauren. Let me
Okay.
see. It's kind of going in and out.
Okay. Let me try to move closer to my computer. Every once in a great while, I have this problem. Of course, I would choose to do this today. Let me know if this is any better. I can put my headphones in if it's not.
Okay. It's a little like we can't hear you that clearly, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna get out of presentation mode. One moment. Okay. Is this any better?
Yes, it's better. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I brought it with me just in case. Sometimes with like the background noise in the room and stuff like that, you never really know what your computer is going to do for the audio.
Understood.
So, all right. So let me get back to sharing. Okay. Are you back to the slideshow? Okay, Whitney?
Yep, it's perfect.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. So hopefully, I'm not sure how much of that you heard, but the goal really of any new tire development is to maximize performances across all of the different performance attributes as best as you can. But typically, that's easier said than done. Typically, if you maximize one performance attribute, you're going to trade off in another. And so, what we really want to figure out is how do we break those trade offs? So, like I mentioned, if you're going to take three performance attributes, three of the most common ones are rolling resistance, which is what correlates to fuel economy, tread wear, how long your tires last, and then wet and dry performance. That's kind of self-explanatory. How well do you do on wet roads and dry roads? Those are three of the most important tire performance parameters kind of globally across all different environments and usage conditions. If you're looking at kind of a normalized rating of the performance, typically if you want to make something better, so let's say we're going to make rolling resistance and tread wear better, we often give up on wet or dry performance. And so how do you break that trade-off is really you have to look to new materials and new ways of compounding the rubbers in order to be able to what we call expand the triangle and to be able to break those performance trade-offs. So enter soybean oil. This was something that Goodyear had been playing with for quite some time, actually, since, oh gosh, probably like 2010, mostly in race tires. We were doing some lab development, but it didn't really have a home or kind of a natural home in any of the products that we were making and selling to the masses. But we kept working on it, kept developing it, trying to figure out how to use it in a way that would be beneficial to the product performance on top of it being a sustainability attribute of its own with being a bio-based material. So what does it do for us? Obviously it's domestic, right? There are soybean fields all across the US. It rotates in with the corn. It is abundant, meaning it's actually in excess. So soybean oil is actually a byproduct of the soy protein harvesting. And so the oil is actually available in excess. So it's not taking food supply or anything away like that because it is actually an excess product based off of the process that we go through to harvest the protein. It's renewable. More of like an energy play, actually more so than just pure sustainability. So we know that actually has an improved compatibility with tire polymers. So the tire polymers that go into the rubber compounds actually like soybean oil better than they like petroleum oil. It has to do with how miscible and how similar the chemical structures are. So that actually helps us with our manufacturing efficiency, because if you have better compatibility with tire polymers, then you're going to have an easier to process material. So you do get a little bit of energy conservation as well. It's kind of a bit of an indirect benefit. More direct benefit to the tire, though, is the very low glass transition temperature of soybean oil. So what that means is when it changes from like a glassy solid material to an oil, and you're thinking to yourself, well, it's an oil, and like I've never been able to freeze an oil. Well, the glass transition temperature is like minus 90 Celsius, so like very low, lower than you would ever get in your house. And it improves, because of that, it improves the balance of wet and snow traction. So it helps the rubber stay pliable at low temperatures, because its glass transition temperature is actually lower than that of petroleum oil. So it helps keep that rubber pliable at the low temperatures, which really helps us with the snow performance. Now, going back to that trade-off chart that we had a few minutes ago, what does that really look like? So again, like I mentioned, as you go down in temperature, so going down in temperature would be going to the left. I know there's no like, units or numbers on here, but we'll be decreasing temperature to the left. And so the stiffness of the rubber with soybean oil, it stays softer as you get to lower temperature versus the petroleum oil, again, because that glass transition temperature is a little bit higher, that compound gets firmer. And so that's really important in winter performance. The softer your compound, the better, because you really want to be able to grip the ice and the snow, and not just have, you know, a super glassy rubber block sliding on top of ice or snow. So it's very similar to if anybody on the call has ever used winter tires and driven maybe all season or summer tires in the snow versus driving winter tires in the snow. It's a huge difference because of the pliability of the rubber. So as I mentioned, soybean oil, if you want to look at petroleum oil as the red triangle here, when we switch to soy, we get quite a drastic increase in the snow performance. We do get a little bit of a decrease in the wet performance, but the offset is not the same. So the benefit that we get in the snow performance is much larger than the detriment that we get to the wet performance. And then you can do other compounding kind of around the soybean oil in order to kind of help finish breaking that trade-off of the wet performance. So, like I said, we really started working on this probably in the 2010 timeframe. It wasn't until 2015 that we actually found a home for it in our products, and we started doing large-scale plant trials with it in our product development. And since most of you, I think, are in North Carolina, we actually did the very first soybean oil trial in a Goodyear, like a regular Goodyear manufacturing plant in our Fayetteville, North Carolina manufacturing plant in 2015. So I was there, actually did that myself. Like I said, I've been kind of tied to this topic around for a while. So I did that myself back in 2015. That was when we were starting to develop the original Assurance Weather Ready, which was a tire that was actually launched in 2017. And more recently, this actually got launched since I first talked to Whitney last year, in August last year at the conference that we were at. So the first one was awesome, but it was, it was 8 years old. So it was time for its successor. And so we did actually launch Weather Ready 2 last fall. And again, that still contains soybean oil. So the original Weather Ready, after we launched it in 2017, it was actually awarded the Tire Technology International 2018 Environmental Achievement of the Year for the use of soybean oil in that product. Hot on the heels of Weather Ready, we also launched Eagle Enforcer All Weather, which is kind of it really is the police tire version of Assurance Weather Ready. So believe it or not, there are special tires for police vehicles, because if you think about police vehicles that have to participate in pursuit activities, the demands of a tire in that case are much larger than what you would get for a conventional passenger tire. So there are actually specific tires that are rated for police pursuit. So we put that into the Eagle Enforcer All Weather, which is our police pursuit tire. And then in 2019, we launched an ultra high performance all season tire called Eagle Exhilarate that also contained soybean oil. Didn't stop there, so we kept going. So in 2020, we launched Assurance Comfort Drive, and we were able to reduce the petroleum oil usage by 62% in that tire overall. And then we kept going. So we had more demand. We did not have it in any commercial tires yet. And so the commercial fleets, especially, get a lot of incentives, and they have kind of a demand to improve the sustainability of their own supply chains. And so, listening to that demand, we put our first soybean oil into some of our first truck tires. And so currently the Goodyear Metro Miler G152 and G652 now have soybean oil incorporated into them as well. And then we also put it into the Endurance WHA, which is a waste haul tire. So we have buses and waste haul vehicles that also have soybean oil based products available to them. Then the fleets were saying, this is great, but we also still have some consumer tires that we buy for a lot of vans and trucks and things like that. And so we utilized that demand in our fleets there to launch some of our workhorse HT SKUs with soybean oil in them as well. So again, these are highway tires for pickup trucks and vans. And again, that was really responding to the fleet demand that we had for soybean oil in our tires. Now, soybean oil is just one of many, many different attributes of Goodyear's sustainability strategy. So our corporate responsibility and sustainability strategy, we call that the Goodyear Better Future framework. And this is something that gets updated every year. This is where our corporate responsibility report lives. So if you look at Goodyear's corporate responsibility website, or if you just search Goodyear Better Future, you can kind of get to it either way. You can find an updated report every year. And it's a big report. It's a fabulous read. Yes, it's technical, but it's also easy to read at the same time. There are a lot of graphics, a lot of data. It really kind of draws you in and keeps you interested versus being something super dry. So if you really like to read up on, what different companies are doing for sustainability, definitely go and check that out on our website. But like I said, we update that every year. It gets updated in like the May, June timeframe. So if you look on our website now, it's actually the 2023 sustainability report, because we will be doing the 2024 one within the next couple of months. So this helps us determine what are the topics that we really need to be looking at. And so like I mentioned, soybean oil is just one of a huge array of things that we're looking at. And so our high priority kind of topics in a nutshell are climate, decarbonization, adaptation and resiliency, circularity, human labor rights, and supply chain governance and transparency. So kind of all of this comes together to build Goodyear's corporate responsibility strategy. Along with the corporate responsibility strategy, we have our corporate responsibility ambitions. And so you'll see down here, here's our soybean oil friends. So I promise this all ties together. So that's where we come back in, where by 2040, we have a goal of achieving a fully replacing our petroleum derived oils in our products with bio-based oils. So soybean oil obviously plays a big role in that. But for any of you who may be nerds about like where crops grow and things like that, a lot of soybeans are prevalent or are available in North America and in Asia, not so much in Europe and Latin America. And so we do have other options available to us. Sunflower oil, rapeseed oil, things like that. There are other bio-based oils that are more prevalent in other regions that are leveraged in those regions, because you can use a bio-based material, but if you have to ship it across the globe versus using something that's available in the region where it is grown, you're increasing your carbon footprint there. So it's not necessarily the most sustainable way to produce a product. But again, by 2040, we have that goal. And then we have many other goals with respect to fuel economy, smart tires, our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, sustainable materials, net zero by 2050. So we have all of these outlined in our Better Future corporate responsibility report. So again, if you want to follow up on that, definitely do so later. So I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper with materials beyond soybean oil. And so, like I said, the soy is just one little component of it. And so we did have another ambition where we said by 2030, we will introduce the first 100% sustainable material and maintenance-free tire. And we have our definition of what a sustainable material is down at the bottom there, because there is a bit of a disclaimer for how it is defined by ISO standards. But how are we going to get there? That's a lot to say. We're going to have 100% of the materials in a tire. And if you're talking about like a normal car tire, that could be 20, 30, 40. If you have a pickup truck, that could be 60, 70 pounds. And even more so for a commercial tire, like how do we do that? That's a lot of different materials. And there are hundreds of materials that go into each tire. So you start at the beginning and you kind of work your way along. So in 2022, we introduced the first 70% sustainable material demonstration tire. So this was 13 different ingredients that were sustainable materials across 9 different tire components. So again, we still had soy involved here. We had some sustainably derived carbon blacks. We have silica from rice husk ash. So that's actually making silica from rice husks. So again, utilizing another byproduct of a harvesting process to make raw materials for tires. And then we had polymers made from bio-based sources. So this was in January 2022, but obviously we have that 2030 goal, so we have to keep going. So in January 2023, we introduced a 90% sustainable material demonstration tire. This now had 17 different ingredients across 12 different tire components. And again, similar to the 70% tire, we had soybean oil, we had different carbon blacks from different non-conventional feedstocks, the rice husk ash silica. We also had biorenewable pine tree resin. So there are resins that get put into tires to help with the grip, especially in wet conditions. And then we also had recycled steel, and then some mass balance polymers from bio and biocircular feedstock. So again, this is a real tire. It passed all of the applicable regulatory and Goodyear internal testing to say, like, yes, this is a tire that can drive on a car on the road. So while we did not sell them, this was a real demonstration of this is possible, and it does pass all of the required testing. Now, we did launch a couple of new soybean oil containing products in 2023. So keeping on, we launched our first Cooper branded product with soybean oil. So for those of you who may or may not know, Goodyear purchased Cooper back in 2021. And we've been obviously integrating our supply chains ever since then and started working on it. But then in late 2023, we did actually put up for sale a 70% sustainable material tire by weight, including soybean oil, and that was the Goodyear Eco Ready. And so that's available in just a couple of sizes for EV fitments, but that is actually available on the market to purchase with 70% sustainable material content. So looking forward, like I said, we have a lot of ambitions related to sustainability, trying to drive a better future for Goodyear and for the world. You may not think about the impact of tires on your daily life if you drive a car or if you ride a bus, or even if you fly in a plane. They very much impact your life every day. And so there's many of them out in the world. And so it actually is a huge sustainability benefit to our world to keep working on things like this. So going back again to soybean oil, right? We have a lot of different products now that contain soybean oil since we've been working on industrializing it in different products since 2017. And we do have that longer term goal of fully replacing all of our petroleum-based oils by 2040. And then again, trying to introduce that 100% sustainable material content demo tire by 2030. So soybean oil is really central to that, along with a lot of other technologies. So that is it from me. I wanted to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions, and I also didn't want to be too long and bore you to death because I realize it's the middle of the afternoon and we can get tired this time of day. So just one quick thank you to the United Soybean Board. So they've actually been a really great collaborator with us since 2011. So we have a really, really good relationship with the USB, and we co-develop with them and try to keep driving innovation forward with respect to using soybean oil in tires. So that is all, and I will go ahead and open it up for questions.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lauren, for your presentation. I mean, like I said, just the wealth of information that was shared has been amazing. We do have some comments in the chat. So just to let all viewers know, um, you all can place questions in the chat, and I will read them to Lauren, and that's how we'll go about it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and check the chat now.
Yep, I see a couple of
Okay.
comments from Lisa and Lisa here.
Oh.
So so yeah, so there's so tires, I probably honestly should add to this presentation kind of the how many different types of materials are used in tires. So I don't know if anybody on this call has ever seen kind of like a cross section of the tire, ever seen a video of how tires are built. But a tire is a very complex laminated structure of a bunch of different components. So you start with what's called the inner liner, which is what holds the air in the tire. So that's made out of a special rubber whose job it is to hold the air in the tire. So air doesn't pass through that particular type of rubber very well. And then you start building reinforcements, rubber coated reinforcements on top of that. Because if you didn't have steel and fabric reinforcements in your tire, it would be a big blobby thing that would just be, flying everywhere. So you start layering those on top, and then eventually you get to, the rubber that makes up the sidewall of the tire, and then you get to the tread, which is the thing that most people think about. But building up those components, you're talking close to 50, 60, 70 different raw materials that go into the tire in a bunch of different compounds that are then all like built together to actually make the finished tire structure, which then, much like baking in the kitchen, you put that in the oven, it bakes so that again you're not just left with a blob that's going to go all over the place, and that's your finished tire. But because you do have so many different materials to replace, it's a challenge to replace them, but it's also an opportunity because there are so many different types of materials. And so we work obviously with all of our suppliers in the different material segments to see what we can do to either improve circularity, to decarbonize, use bio-based materials, anything like that, anything and everything really we work on with all of our different raw material suppliers. So yes, this topic was really focused around usage of soybean oil because that's one of our most mature bio-based raw materials that we use. We do work with suppliers for all of our different raw material categories, as you saw in the last couple of slides that I had on the demonstration tires, as well as the Eco-Ready.
Yeah.
All right, and then scrolling back up.
Okay.
Okay, and then I see Reginald's question: are there any challenges in scaling up the use of soybean oil for mass tire production? So yes and no is the answer to that question. So from the availability of the soybean oil product, no. So as I mentioned, it is actually produced in excess beyond what can be consumed as part of food, right? In salad dressings or in fryer oils and things like that. There has to be more soy protein harvested for other reasons that gives more oil than what can be consumed from an oil perspective. So from that perspective, in terms of the availability of the material, no, there's not an issue with scaling up. Now, like I said, it's really only abundant in North America and Asia. So you don't want to be shipping it to Latin America or Europe if there are other more domestic to those areas options available, because transport is not great for your carbon footprint, right? So, so there are other options available to us in other regions. The hardest part is actually integrating it into our manufacturing footprint. So when you're making tires, it starts with making the rubber compounds that then you make into the different shapes. So if you just think about it like cooking, because making tires is basically just cooking rubber. You put all of the ingredients into a mixer. So let's just pretend it's your KitchenAid. It's really not much different, just a lot bigger. And it works a little bit differently, but it's basically just a giant mixer. So you put all of your ingredients into a mixer, but we're talking about a mixer that is 370 liters big. So it's like 3 stories tall. The batch weights are a couple hundred pounds, right? There's a lot of material that goes in there. So it's quite a different scale than what you think of. And so because of that, you're using very large quantities of raw materials. And so a lot of those raw materials have to be put directly into the mixer by some type of conveyance system. And so soybean oil, because it is a liquid, it gets piped directly into the mixer from tanks. Now, because tanks and pipes and all that stuff are capital, right? You're only going to have really what you need and not a lot of extra empty tanks and pipes just sitting there, not having any materials in them. So that was really the hardest part, was that scale up in our manufacturing facilities, because you have to have a way to get the oil directly into the mixer. And some plants had a means to do this. Some plants you could hook up like a smaller like, 1,000-liter tote or something like that to a piping system. They would be able to do it that way. Some plants didn't have that capability, and so you needed to have a whole extra tank for the soybean oil. So that was really the hardest part. And when we did the original demonstration of like, does it give us the benefit in tires that we think it does? That was what I mentioned that we had actually done in our Fayetteville, North Carolina plant. One of the plant compounders and I actually filled what are called pigment bags. They're low melt plastic bags that we actually put some solid ingredients into that like go on a belt that charges into the mixer versus being conveyed automatically through pipes and things like that. But we didn't have a way to convey it through pipes for a trial. So we filled these plastic bags with oil and we like ran along the belt and threw them in the mixer. And we did that all by hand. So, but that was what we had to do to kind of prove that it worked. So definitely, Reginald, kind of to sum up, scale up is not an issue from the material availability perspective. It's more of an issue from the manufacturing equipment perspective. But at this point in time, we have it in the majority of our North America plants. And so we're kind of over the hump on that one, so to speak. So we're in a good spot at this point.
All right.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
next question, are there different varieties of soybeans, some that are better for eating versus using for non-food users?
I do not know, Lisa. I'm from Missouri, so you think I know more about crops, but and I live in Ohio, but I actually do not know the answer to that question.
Okay. And the next question, this is from Reginald. Do you foresee soybean oil being used in other rubber or industrial applications beyond tires?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So the United Soybean Board has a huge grant program called Soy Checkoff. So they are constantly partnering with companies to utilize soybean oil in different industrial products. So yes, for sure, beyond tires. I don't know who all they're partnering with, but that is a well-established program that's been around, for a couple of decades now to try to find novel uses for soybean oil.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Lisa Oliver. So the question that we have from Lisa Oliver is, please describe any lessons learned in the use of soybean oil in tire development. What research launched the use of soybeans to replace petroleum in tire manufacturing process, in the tire manufacturing process?
Yeah. So going back to kind of the very beginning of my presentation when I was talking about trade-offs, ultimately soybean oil found a home because of its ability to break trade-offs. So when we were first given the product performance requirements for assurance weather ready. So that's always based on some type of market research, looking at what consumers want, what the competitors are offering, things like that. And so that our marketing team works on that, and they come to the R&D teams and say, okay, this is, this product needs to do XYZ when we're launching it, right? And so they give you those, what we call like features and benefits. They give you kind of that assignment to go design around. And at this point in time, so this was back in 2014, 2015, when we first started working on the Assurance Weather Ready. The concept of all weather tires, those are different from all season tires. All weather tires have a special marking on them called the Three Peak Mountain Snowflake stamp. And that stamp is historically was limited to winter tires because they achieve a certain amount of snow traction versus a standard reference test tire in a specific standard snow test. And so historically, only winter tires had been able to do that. And so there are some parts of the country in the US, mainly more in Canada, and then also over in Europe, where you are legally not allowed to drive on tires in the wintertime that do not have that snowflake stamp. And so, but where the technology started going, 15 years or so ago, was there were technologies available like soybean oil that were going to enable us to take an all-season tire that could still perform at those higher temperatures too, but also have it bear the snowflake stamp such that it performs at low temperatures as well. So really broadening the applicability of a tire instead of having to switch between summer and winter tires all the time for the places that require you to drive on winter tires. Then you could drive on that same tire all year because it was snowflake stamped. And then really what the marketing team saw was with the few products that were available on the market at that point in time, they were seeing more demand from consumers in states like Ohio, where I live, where it's like, yeah, we get quite a bit of snow, but maybe not enough snow to really be incentivized to, keep two different sets of tires, have to go change them out twice a year, right? Have to have a separate set of rims. Like it's honestly kind of a giant pain in the rear end if you get like the some level of snow versus living somewhere where you really do need winter tires. And so they saw that increase in demand. And so that was really what drove the creation of Assurance Weather Ready. And so we knew, roughly that soybean oil could help us expand that temperature range. But we only really had that data from the lab. And so, that's just looking at kind of performance indicators of a little tiny piece of rubber versus actually building tires that you then go do like actual tire testing on. Does it stop in the snow? Does it, deal with hydroplaning well and things like that? And so that in that development program was where we had the pull from to really expand that performance range because Assurance Weather Ready was supposed to perform really well in snow, but also really well in wet. And so that was kind of the first home for it. And we did, again, like I said, through those initial trials, thankfully confirm that it did do in a real tire what we thought it would do based on the lab testing data. And so Assurance Weather Ready was its first home. And then, like I said, after that, the Eagle and Forster All Weather was basically kind of like the Assurance Weather Ready of Pursuit tires. And so we needed to do the same thing, right, to expand the performance range because the police fleets especially had a desire to not have to do tire changeovers between summer and winter anymore. And then after that, the Eagle Exhilarate, we needed it to be a really, really good summer performance tire, but also have some like base level of snow performance. And so that's kind of where soybean oil helps for that. So that's really, what we learned or how we implemented it. In terms of lessons learned, really a lot about manufacturing and how you can trial new raw materials, how you can actually incorporate them into manufacturing. There were a lot of lessons learned there. And then just being open to finding other benefits. Like we didn't really we understood at an academic level that there might be a benefit of soybean oil to processing because we did see some indicators in the lab, but we didn't actually realize how much in terms of like lower mixing time, extrusion quality was better, like all this kind of stuff. And so we didn't really realize that we were also getting benefits on the efficiency side too with soybean oil. So keep an open mind for everything.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have Lisa Dan from Indiana. She said that they grow a lot of soybeans.
Yeah.
She wanted to know, do you know how much of Indiana soybeans are used in this type of application or for other products?
Yeah, Lisa, I live in Ohio now, but I'm from St. Louis originally, so I drive along I-70 a lot. So I see your Indiana soybeans. But so I don't know exactly what our regional mix is. We do source from obviously from domestic sources. It is U.S. Soy that we are sourcing. So depending on, like Cargill, for example, is a big supplier of soybean oil. So depending on where they source from, I don't know the exact breakdown. I think that the USB, they were talking to me recently about like some program that they were starting to basically say you could um, purchase soybeans from a specific area. I forget all the details, but right now we're really more at the mercy of where do our suppliers source their soybeans from. And again, like I said, they are domestic to the United States. I just don't know the state by state breakdown.
Mhm. All right. So, Lisa Oliver says, talk about public perception of soybean oil use in tire technology development. How has the Goodyear Better Future campaign propelled other manufacturers to prioritize corporate responsibility of their products?
Yeah, so the tire industry, and like this is not Goodyear leading all the time, Michelin and Bridgestone and Conti, like they lead plenty of times too. The tire industry is actually extremely competitive. So if one manufacturer does something, the other ones will follow. And so yeah, after we launched the soybean oil, I don't know how much soy is going into other manufacturers' products, but I have seen others launch things with like orange oil. I remember a big thing around orange oil. I remember a big thing around, like I said, rapeseed oil, sunflower oil. And then there's other like raw material, bio-based raw materials like dandelion rubber in place of natural rubber, things like that. So every single tire company that is a major tire company that's not just like trying to crank out volume. Anybody who's really invested in R&D is working on bio-based materials, either the full raw material or working with suppliers to work on bio-based feedstocks for the raw materials that the suppliers are producing. So Goodyear was definitely a leader in this space. Like I said, it goes back and forth. Sometimes Goodyear leads, sometimes Michelin leads, sometimes Bridgestone leads, right? Everybody takes their turn in leading. From a soybean oil perspective, Goodyear was definitely a leader in that case. And we did see a large uptick in like PR activity from other tire companies shortly after we launched Assurance Weather Ready. We were also a leader in the space of a high sustainable content demonstration tire. And so not too long after we started putting out the 70%, the 90% demo tires, you did start seeing a lot more sustainable content demonstrations from other tire manufacturers as well. So I think for sure, there's been some inspiration from us, but then, like I said, there are some places where the other tire manufacturers have been out front first with respect to sustainability. So I think we're all elevating each other, which is a great thing. You want that competition. You don't just want to be complacent and just keep making the same things the same way that you've always made them.
Okay, thank you. So, Lisa Oliver, she says North Carolina has a tire disposal fee per tire. Do you foresee the possibility of reduced rates or other incentives for these fees as a reward for using higher environmentally rated
Yeah,
tires?
that's a really interesting question. I would say that circularity in general, so tire circularity, whether that is tire to tire circularity or just like recycling to some other product, that is an extremely hot topic right now, with all of the tire manufacturers, and all the tire manufacturers also participate in this group called the Tire Industry Project, or TIP, which is run by the WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Um, Circularity can be a really hard thing um, to tackle because of how tire distribution works. So, and again, it's like way more complicated than you ever realize, because you just don't think about like how the tires that you have on your car got to where they are. But like, you can buy direct tires directly from Goodyear. You can buy tires, you can go to like Walmart or Sam's Club or Costco and buy tires from them, and they got them directly from a tire manufacturer. You could have tires that go directly to a large retailer like Discount Tire. You could have tires that go through a wholesaler and then go to a large retailer. You could have tires that go through a wholesaler and go to a mom and pop shop. And so our visibility into like what ultimately happens to tires is still very low. There are statistics that are gathered by industry bodies that represent the tire industry that we use in terms of looking at ultimately like what happens to tires kind of on a percentage basis, but those are like industry average numbers. We are talking a lot. There's a whole circularity task force within the Tire Industry Project that is looking at how do we improve our ability to calculate circularity, to leverage circularity, all this kind of stuff. End of life tire treatment. Like how do we get better at tracking this and doing something about it? And Lisa, you're right. Like if we have if your inflows, or if you're talking from a circularity perspective, if your inflows are more environmentally friendly, then potentially you could do something different with your outflow, which is your end of life tires. So I think in the short term, I don't think that's going to happen, just because there are still so many question marks with respect to how we can calculate circularity. I think in the longer term, there definitely could be some type of benefit like that. I will use one example over in France. There is just went into effect this year. There's an extended producer responsibility regulation that went into effect for tires, where and again, it's about managing the inflows. And so if you have certain substances of concern, which are more hazardous raw materials from an environmental perspective, you actually have to pay a penalty for using those materials. Like the tire manufacturers have to pay a penalty for using those materials in their tires. And then the tire manufacturers actually get a bonus for using recycled or renewable content in the tires. So trying to encourage the industry to move more toward higher sustainable content. And so I do think, again, eventually, like once we figure out how to improve our math on circularity, I think longer term, that kind of stuff could trickle down, but I don't think it's imminent.
Okay. Well, let's see. Okay.
There's
And
one
we have
more. Yeah,
another
there's one more
question here.
question. Yeah.
What inspired your focus of tire development in your engineering career?
It was so I did not go to school expecting to go into tires. Actually, I wanted to be a doctor originally, and then I decided to stick with engineering. But my husband will say I made fancy Jello in graduate school. When I was working on my PhD, my research was actually on developing hydrogel materials for tissue engineering scaffolds. Had nothing to do with tires. But what I was really looking at in my PhD work was looking at, okay, if I make a chemical structure, then it has like this impact on the physical properties of the gel that I'm making with it. And so then if I change this chemical structure, how does it change how the gel is behaving? So tuning the behavior of the material with the chemical structure of what I'm putting into it. So they call that structure property relationships. So when I was looking for jobs, and I went to graduate school in Cleveland, so I was already in the Northeast Ohio area. When I was looking for jobs, one came up at Goodyear, material scientist, very explicitly heavy on structure property relationships of materials. And so that was kind of ultimately how I ended up in the tire industry. It was not really on purpose. But it was really more from what I wanted to do from a scientific perspective. I ended up loving it a lot, because it is extremely complicated. So tires are extremely complicated. The tire industry is extremely complicated, and so that complexity has kept me here, because I like new challenges and learning and everything like that. And so yeah, most people look at it and they're like, yeah, it's round and black and it drives my car. But when you get down to the science of it and the nuances of everything, it's an extremely interesting industry to be working in. And on top of that, like I said earlier, it, it touches your life every day. So it's really cool to be a part of something that people can connect to so much. Again, even if you don't think about it all the time because the tires are just there, it is something that you interact with every day.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lauren. And just so everyone in the audience knows, this webinar will actually be posted on our website. So that you can look at it again, because Lauren did such an amazing job, and I know everyone else is muted, but I want to make sure that I give her a hand.
Thanks, buddy.
You're most welcome. And also Lauren, when it comes to to these tires, do you have any friends who have soybean oil tires on their personal vehicles?
Oh, I mean, I do, but
Oh,
yes,
nice.
no,
Okay.
yeah, no, I family, friends. So again, because of where we live in Ohio, the weather ready products are really popular tires. And so, those are ones that we see a lot just driving around here. So yeah, I mean, I do, obviously, we have police fleets too and stuff like that. So no, they're great. They're great tires. I'm on my third set now of weather readies. I think that'll be my last set, because the next one I have to buy, it has to be the weather ready too. But yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
This is awesome. Well,
Yep.
I'm really impressed with how you're helping the environment with your initiatives. And like I said, I think that concludes all the
Yep.
questions we have today. And thank you so much for being our guest speaker, Lauren.
Yep. Thank you all very much for attending. It was fun to talk to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everybody have an amazing day.
Okay. I guess.
Bye.